Good afternoon, grade 8s. This should be our last lesson on human reproduction, and then we will carry on with the different section. So on Wednesday, I explained the rules and described the rules for doing a flow diagram in life sciences. And today, you are actually going to do a flow diagram. So I'm going to quickly go through the rules again, and you are today to complete the activity on page 82 of the textbook. So remember that the rules for doing a flow diagram or a flow chart in life sciences are very specific. You always, if you're doing it like in a test or exam, start on a new page. You don't try and squash it in the bottom third of one page. You start a new page, you give the diagram a complete heading, just like you would do for a graph or a table or an actual drawing in life sciences. You give it a complete heading. Each step of a process is written using either a word or a short phrase, but never an entire sentence. The steps have to go in sequence. They go down the page, and arrows are used to join each step. You must never use boxes or clouds around each step. So you write a phrase, you leave a line open. Let's go back to the one that I did for you the other day. You write a phrase, you leave a line open, and in that line you draw the arrow going down. And it doesn't have to be a little colored in arrow. In fact, don't do a little colored in arrow. Life is too short. Just draw an arrow, and then the next stage, and then a line open that has an arrow in it, etc. Okay, so that's what you've got to do for as part of today's lesson. The activity on page 82. Right, let's have a look at the actual process of birth. So when a female is ready to give birth, the hormone oxytocin, now remember, if it's in blue, you don't have to learn it, is released by the body of the mother, and it causes the contractions of the uterus. So these are what are known as labor pains. The amniotic membrane breaks, and the amniotic fluid is released. So you often hear it referred to as the waters break. So passing out through the vaginal canal, there will be the amniotic liquid. The cervix dilates. In other words, it gets bigger and wider. So it widens and widens, and it widens considerably. It has to be able to widen up to 10 centimeters for the baby's head to actually pass out. So when the cervix is dilated to 10 centimeters, then the baby is ready to be born. Okay, now you can see here that the head, in the second diagram on the right here, the head passes out first. I spoke about that in Wednesday's lesson. And then the two shoulders squeeze out. And after that, it's quite easy for the rest of the body to come out. And you can also see here, the placenta is starting to pull away from the wall of the uterus. So there's the uterus wall. Here is the placenta starting to pull away. And this is the umbilical cord. Still remember I said to you that the umbilical cord is clamped and cut. And so this is a little while shortly after, I think it's about 20 minutes if I remember correctly, after the baby is born, the placenta will have pulled away and contractions start again, and the placenta and this little remnants of the umbilical cord pass out through the vagina. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about twins, and this is also just for interest only, but it's quite interesting. So remember that in terms of the genetics so the genes that the individuals carry. There are two different kinds of twins, identical and non-identical or fraternal. So let's talk about identical twins first. So what happens here? The mother releases a single ovum. Oh no, look at this mistake. And that ovum is fertilized by one, that word should be sperm. Okay, sorry, sperm. When that little single-celled zygote divides into two cells, which is the embryo, and the embryo carries on, the cells of the embryo carry on dividing, okay, then at some stage, as this little ball of cells is moving down the fallopian tubes, it splits into two separate little balls of cells, each of which then develops into a separate individual or a separate embryo. However, because they came from the same zygote, they are genetically identical. In other words, their genes are absolutely identical to each other. Really, they are clones of each other. Okay, so that then is identical twins. And my question to you is, explain why the scientific term for identical twins is monozygotic twins. Okay, so let's have a look at the diagram. So there's one ovum or egg cell, one sperm, one fertilized egg cell, so there's the zygote, and that starts to split into 2 cells, 4 cells, 8 cells, 16, 32, and at any stage, that little ball of cells might be right from as early as when it's 2 cells, might be a little bit later on as it's moving down the fallopian tubes. It splits into 2 separate balls that develop independently. Remember though, they have identical chromosomes, so their genes are exactly the same as each other. Okay, non-identical twins or fraternal twins. So the mother releases 2 ova in a month, and that's not the norm. Each is fertilized by different sperm. 2 separate embryos develop, and the 2 embryos are not genetically identical to each other. In fact, they are as similar to each other as 2 siblings, like 2 brothers or 2 sisters, or 1 brother, 1 sister. They're genetically not identical to each other. Obviously, because they come from the same set of parents, they would be more similar genetically to each other than they are to, say, 2 people that are unrelated to them, but they're not genetically identical. Okay, so if you look at the drawing, you can see an egg cell and an egg cell, each fertilized by a separate sperm, 2 separate zygotes, each of them implant separately in the uterus. They've got 2 separate placentas at totally different places in the uterus, and they are genetically not identical to each other. Okay, so explain why the scientific term for non-identical twins is dizygotic twins. Okay, so that means that monozygotic twins are always the same sex. Identical twins, always the same sex. Dizygotic twins may be the same sex, or they may be of the opposite sex. So they may be 2 girls, 2 boys, or 1 girl, 1 boy. Okay. Right, so just another picture of it, and this is showing you identical twins, came from the same fertilized egg, and they share a placenta. Fraternal twins, 2 separate placentas. Okay, then that's the end of that section. Okay, so I will release the memo for that flow diagram on Wednesday next week. Okay, if you've got any questions, you're welcome to email them to me, okay, and I will answer them. or if you want an ASP, you're welcome to request an ASP. You must learn this work, and you must be ready for an assessment at any stage. Happy weekend, guys.